Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to FIDM's ongoing series, The Future of. Our topic this month is mCommerce. I am Tom Hinkenny, as the director of FIDM's Bachelor in Digital Marketing and Bachelor's in Graphic Design. Before we get going today, we actually had a favor of all of you. I believe we have a QR code coming up here in a moment, and I think we'll be able to drop a link into the chat. We have a couple questions just to see how this series has served you in your work and in your life. And as we move forward out of the pandemic, we hope at least, back into something of a more normal work environment. We'd have a few questions just to ask, is the time right for you? What are the topics? How are they serving you? How can we help you better? As most of you probably know, this is part of FIDM's effort to reach out to our community and our family of alumni and students and faculty. And so we want to make sure we're doing the best we can to serve you in every way we can. So if you have a few seconds to either scan the QR code and go to the site or click on the link, or we'll show you the QR code one more time before we take off today. Please just take a few minutes. I think it's like a 10-question survey, and that includes asking for your name and email address, which are not mandatory. So you can even do it and tell us how horrible we are if you really feel that way. We'll never know it was you who said it. Back on track to what we're talking about today, and that is mCommerce. I had a lot of people, when we actually started talking about this subject, come to me and say, hey, Tom, what does the M stand for? And so let's get that off the back. It's mobile. It's mobile commerce. And it's actually quite a broad topic. Let's track the term back. Of course, there's retail sales, just general commerce, right? I'm thinking most of us here will probably know what that means. E-marketers actually put it the total value of all retail sales globally at $5.3 trillion. Significant. Then there's e-commerce sales. On this chart, I want to really focus you on the blue line. In 2021, e-commerce sales will make up about 15% of all retail sales. To me, it's always important to point that particular statistic out because we talk so much about e-commerce and mCommerce, and it is significant. But even by 2025, it's still going to be less than a quarter of all sales. Back to the main point. What then is mCommerce and why should we talk about it today? Basically, mCommerce is any purchase that's made through your mobile device. Swipe up on Instagram, make a purchase. That's mCommerce. Check out at Target and then go pick up curbside. That's also considered mCommerce. In 2020, mCommerce made up about 5% of sales, around a quarter of all e-commerce sales. But by 2024, Insider Intelligence is predicting mCommerce will be a total of 10% of all sales. What's driving that growth? It depends on who you ask. Traditionally, the biggest hurdle preventing conversion on mobile was actually the size of the screen. Think about your own personal behaviors, right? Too small, I need to see it on the big screen. Screens have gotten larger, but I still don't think that's actually what's driving this increase in sale. I think it's about ease of use. We've made it easier to check out on mobile. Three of the biggest players in social all have buy now buttons, and now we're going to include TikTok in that. Last month, they announced a partnership with Shopify, excuse me, too many FIs out there, to allow customers to buy in-app. To me, that's it. It's that in-app shopping. It's breaking down the barriers. It's one-tap technology. It's the better technology, 5G, AR. Our guests this afternoon, though, have their own takes on all of this, so I want to get right to them. Over the next hour, you'll hear from Pamela Denzinger, a market researcher and consultant who's a senior Forbes contributor. She specializes in the luxury market. Really interesting thoughts on this space. We will also speak to Jared Horowitz, who's the Chief Revenue Officer with Branding Brand. They build mobile experiences for companies. So literally, it is his life's work to get us to shop on our mobile devices. But first, I want to speak to Kira Cohen. She is currently the global head of marketing for Killstar. She's had actually a really long career, though, working for companies like TechStyle and several of the brands within TechStyle. And Kira, as I invite you to turn your camera on and join us, I wonder if we could start with just getting your perspective on what's changed and why this seems to be mobile's moment, reaching maybe upwards of half of all e-commerce sales. What are your thoughts?
Sure. I think it has a lot to do with ease, which is what you just walked through, right? I mean, obviously everybody wants ease of purchase, and in this day and age, they're actually not willing to compromise on it. It has to be that way. I also think accessibility is a really big thing, though. I think that we have now become trained, to your point, on social platforms with TikTok, Instagram, where we can either shop within, swipe up immediately, see the look 5 different ways, click the brand and see other tagged photos. The accessibility is not only, will this be available in my store in brick and mortar, which was no longer an issue with e-com, but with e-com, it was getting them to the site. It was having them open emails. It was getting them to Google things. It was getting your kind of targeted ads to follow. Now with, mobile, you're going into your apps, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all of them, and it's right in your pocket. It's right there and it's easily accessible. And I think with COVID, a lot of people were looking at their mobile areas to escape reality, right? You're going on Instagram and all those areas to escape the reality of it. So at that point, I think we saw a huge uptick, somewhat because of COVID, but I think that this would be happening regardless.
Do you think, when you think about this whole piece, how it all fits together? We were talking before about sort of the there's been so many terms for it, but the convergence of all of retail. Mm-hmm. Is this just part of that continuing convergence?
Yes and no, I think, for sure. I think what's interesting about the accessibility play into this is that because when you think of e-com and mCom, you think of it as being the opposite of brick and mortar, and that they don't necessarily have to go hand in hand, that maybe they could live independently. And I'm by no means saying that that's not an option. However, what I have actually found is that people, because they have the accessibility now to your brand in the form of all of these people, whether it's influencers, brand ambassadors, ads, ad access, whatever it is, you have all of these people now with such easy access to you that they want to continue that. And that is in the form of in-stores, in-store appearances. They want to be able to know where they can meet that person and when and how easy that would be. And all of that, again, comes through social platforms. That comes from going live. That comes from doing Q&As. That comes from come meet me here. And it was something that I thought would be phasing out somewhat. That was not the case before COVID. Some of the experiential stuff was getting a little bit tired, I think. However, I think after COVID, you're going to see actually an upswing in that for a lot of reasons. But what I actually found is that they very much go hand in hand. And if you can have your strategy be that you're going to look at them across the board, how you can intertwine them, but also have them stand independently, you're going to see some really well-rounded sales.
As I read a lot of articles, especially getting ready for today, but this has been a space I've been kind of paying attention to for a minute now. When you think about it, they sort of focus on the pandemic, they focus on technology, but it's interesting that your point of view is more about accessibility as the driver. As I mentioned, AR, VR, 5G, all the tech things are also playing in the growth of this. Do you see that as part of what's driving retail growth as well? Or where does the tech piece fit in?
Yes and no for the retail growth of it. The tech piece is so interesting because I think when you have AR, it's going to change the game in a lot of ways. However, I think that we're both underthinking and overthinking some of the things that maybe the actual consumer would possibly like and what we're developing. A great example, in my opinion, is all of us have been waiting for that Cher Horowitz closet from Clueless. Like, where is that? And it's actually, it used to be like I thought it was me and my friends, but actually research did show that it was popping up a decent amount, that people wanted to be able to figure out what they were going to wear, and they wanted to do that digitally. I think that you have brands, there's a current brand out there that is a fast fashion company that is doing it. I know it's in testing or in beta right now, but it's very unique. And how they're looking to do it is they're going to do a 2-tier approach. They want to be able to get items out immediately, essentially. So if there's a pop culture moment happening at midnight, they want you to be able to pre-order whatever that look was by 8 a.m. the next day. How they've been doing it in the past is they would be cutting fabric in real time, using clothespins, all of that to photograph it and editing the color in post. However, what they've been working on for a little bit over a year now is actually digitally creating models that are talent. So the model itself that's being created to obviously model the clothes and do all of that will also have their own Instagram, TikTok, potentially, a lot of different areas. And so at that point, that's the brand creating their own celebrity, if you will, but also making it so the fast fashion is going to be immensely faster, because then you can be digitally adding on apparel items almost in real time to have available on pre-order. So I think that how we view AR and how we view tech is interesting, because we always kind of view it as either this huge thing that's so out of scope, but in reality, there's a lot of very unique things that brands are doing that I think will absolutely move the needle.
It's interesting too. We had a conversation with some folks from Clo, which is one of the software companies that does exactly what you're describing, right? Like digitally now you can create this garment. And as I was watching last night, the arrivals to the Met Gala, I was thinking about the story you just shared, because we talked about it previously. And I thought, I wonder if tomorrow morning, if I jump online, and I had a crazy morning with meetings and a bunch of other things, I had to vote. But other than that, I didn't have a chance to look, but I'm guessing there's some of those styles out there this morning, and I wonder how many of them are digitally created, where
Right.
it's just crazy to think about. But it led me to another question that I apologize, I didn't feed you this one in advance, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway. As I was thinking of that yesterday, and I know you and the brands you've worked with have largely worked with celebrities and influencer culture. And it made me think about how this whole mCommerce trend, right? I follow the celebrity, you know, it goes back to your accessibility to the celebrity is right here, as you have said. That's really kind of what's making it. Like, that was kind of the point that I saw. It was like, oh, lights went off. I understand what you're talking about. Is that, I mean, in essence, is that what you're saying? That we watch that there, we buy it here. It's all accessible right here.
Absolutely. Everything needs to be kind of able to be connected. And where are you going to do that, right? If you're watching things in real time, whether it's on screen or whether it's being told to you or it's on Instagram, you want to be able to either go find it if you aren't on that platform, or you want to be able to see what other people are talking about. You want to be a part of the conversation. And so when you have a mouthpiece or talent or influencer that is giving their audience accessibility and that is showcasing their entire life all the time, and you have everything else, yeah, it's all going to work hands in hand. Absolutely.
You're currently with Killstar, as I mentioned off the top. You've been there for just a short while, and you're really introducing this brand to a global audience, hence your title. So I'm curious what's different now that we've seen this big rise in mCommerce. You've been at a lot of other big players in the space. What weren't you thinking about? What are you thinking about now? And it probably would bear to have you tell us a little bit about the brand as well, as you discuss it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I started at Killstar a few months ago. Killstar is an alternative fashion brand that's been around for about 11 years. And it has a great audience base within its own genre. It's very, very big in Europe, UK. I'm trying to bring that over here to have that same big energy. And we will be doing a light rebrand with it. It's a little bit leans very, very heavily into potentially a little bit more of a niche market, where right now we are trying to capitalize on the 90s trend that we're seeing pick up with grunge and alt with a fast follow. So we'll be capitalizing on that. So one thing with Killstar that I'm considering that I maybe wouldn't have with a couple of the more recent brands I've worked on is one of the huge plays we'll be doing in that with the US market is within Gen Z, because obviously they're the ones that are very much adopting that punk alt moment right now. And then some, they're actually incorporating it into their outfits that would be very, very different and unique. And it's also an age demo that research shows other generations would say, if you wear that today, you're a poser because you didn't wear it yesterday. Whereas opposed to Gen Z, who says you're being all avenues of yourself, you're exploring all areas of yourself. So it's a little bit more of an accepting audience anyways, in fashion with that regard. So for me with Killstar now, I have to look at mobile. Not that I wouldn't be looking at it mobile first anyways, which I would be, but in a way where you potentially could have an audience that actively does not go into their email, or that actively does not go onto the site, and they don't shop websites. They shop only on their phone, and that's what they've been trained to do, because for the majority of the time they've had a credit card or a debit card, that's where they've been shopping, and that's kind of their user behavior. So a lot of the things will be very mobile first, and we'll all be accessibility first. A lot of lives when we do a brand ambassador program, which we'll be launching next year, a lot of that's going to be heavily integrated with people's fan bases, because we want to make sure that they see not only do you have access to the brand via this person, but this person is going to be able to give it to you every single time if you keep coming back.
One of the things you said to me before is that you're thinking about, can they check out at a stoplight? That like lack of barrier to entry. So, I mean, I'm just curious, what do you do? Is that tech-based? Again, back to that question, What is the barrier that is not allowing them to check out at a stoplight? What are you overcoming to make that happen?
I think honestly, sometimes it can be overthinking. Sometimes it's trying to put all the bells and whistles of, we want to make sure that they know this, and we want to make sure they know this, and we want to give them the gift with purchase. And I'm not saying any of that doesn't work. It can very much work. However, when it's a little bit bogged down, potentially you could be giving too much information into there. I think it's also looking at your platforms and looking at mobile and e-com is slightly different, and how you're going to address those audiences. Because if you're on mobile, you very much want that. I could be at a stoplight, and in theory, if I swiped up or clicked, I could, with 1 to 2 purchases, purchase. And, I think with Amazon, with a lot of with PayPal, with things like that, we very much have trained that customer behavior as well, where they expect that, and you might lose the purchase if they can't.
What have you got your eyes on right now? What's kind of like trending? What are you looking toward the future at?
It's funny because this is going to be potentially controversial. When I look at social platforms, I actually think that we only look at a few and we should be looking at more. A really great example that is not going to be for every brand, but OnlyFans has 86% the viewership rate. They have 86% people coming back. I mean, obviously, you're subscribing, so you're going to come back for your money. Is that going to work for Martha Stewart's brand? No. However, if I'm Savage X Fenty lingerie, or if I'm Killstar lingerie, I'm a rocker kind of alt audience, that makes a lot of sense to me. It also, depending on your company standpoint, for ours, it's very empowering, right? It's an empowering moment for women. And if I could, as a female, be able to support another woman via a monthly $2, $5, $10, and actually see lingerie not airbrushed out where I could see what it would look like on my body, everybody's winning at that point. I also think that's a huge brand play. If I were Savage X Fenty, Rihanna's been very vocal about legalizing sex work and about all of that. That's phenomenal. You're then taking a platform and you're making sure that people can also get compensated, but you as a brand are tapping into that 86%. So again, it's not for everybody, but I do think as brands, we need to open our eyes and say, where is the highest number? And is that something that could work for us? Clearly don't put yourself in there if it's not, because that would be a stretch. But I think we sometimes have tunnel vision as to these are the areas that work, therefore only. But we need to kind of open our eyes a little bit more.
I have so many follow-up questions to that because I think it's so fascinating, but I will leave that to the audience and invite them to use the Q&A button at the bottom, and we'll invite you to come back in a few minutes after we chat with our other panelists. But thank you so much, Kira. It's fascinating, and that concept is just great. So out of the box, but perfect. Let's turn to Jared, who is the Chief Revenue Officer of Branding Brand, as I mentioned. Jared, we've looked at the rise of mCommerce from the retailer's point of view through Kira. I'm curious to hear now from the developer's POV. What is it that you are looking at as you're thinking about the future of mCommerce?
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you for having me. And as you said before, and actually as Kira just said, the brand's been around for 11 years. Well, I've been doing this now for 11 years. So mobile has been one of these things where we've always wanted folks to come to mobile. Back when we launched our first mobile site about 11 years ago, it was like 1% of traffic. And today it's about 70 to 80%, some higher, some lower of traffic. The goal today is to get folks to buy, is to remove friction, is to try to make a better, faster experience. So technology definitely helps empower speed and things like that. So today's Apple event, which I know you did purposely in your making today's mCommerce on Apple's event that just ended about an hour ago. And the phones are getting faster. Screen sizes are getting bigger and smaller and changing and adapting. But the reality is retailers have always built for the desktop. And more folks are now coming via mobile first, and the experience needs to change. And technology itself from data and the e-commerce platforms has now since changed as well. So APIs and being able to build a separate experience, that's made for the mobile device for Instagram versus Safari versus Chrome versus iPhone versus Android, and being able to adapt to a responsive design, but has different breakpoints and a consumer experience for the mobile device. And that includes also express payments and all that stuff as well.
Let's talk about that consumer experience. Another trending phrase is the CX, right? Like, so we're looking at that. Then what is it that you are seeing from the brand side? What are they saying they want in the consumer experience? What are consumers seeing in the studies you guys are doing on the consumer side and the pricing side?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different types of groups. So a lot of the retailers we work with are multi-channel retailers. So as you mentioned before, mobile means so many different things. I could be on my way to the store, as you mentioned, the curbside pickup. I could be in the store. I could be home, sitting on my couch, wanting to interact with a store. So being able to reserve stuff for the fitting room before I get there, check in at the store, and stuff is available in the fitting room. It's kind of like a shared moment as well, where you can then put everything together and you walk into the store and it's all sitting there in the fitting room, just waiting for you. But doing those different types of things is really the experience. And how do you differentiate web and then phasing into apps, where a mobile app that's dedicated for a brand makes sense to level up and give more of an exclusive experience to your loyal customers.
Do you see? Well, let's dive in on that curbside pickup thing, right? Like, because I'm thinking about my experience with Target.
Yep.
Pre-pandemic, I tried it at Target just to experiment and see if it worked. It was a horrible user experience. Like, they didn't know I was there. I ended up having to go in the store.
Sure.
So I guess the question in here is, what has the pandemic done to drive this technology further? And for companies like Target, and you're working with that size of company, what are you seeing them really leaning into?
Yeah, I mean, I think even prior to the pandemic, curbside started to be a thing, but 9 out of 10 people you asked would have no idea what that means. Now, everywhere you go, from a local liquor store to, you know, a Target, they have curbside pickup. The difference is, how do you make it scalable? How do you make the user experience, you know, just engaging? And then how do you set employees up for success as well? So it's only as good as technology enables it for you to check in, and then an associate to know that you're outside waiting for your order in X, Y, and Z car, and bring that together. So I think the pandemic has really helped accelerate the consumer expectation. So if you have that experience now at Target, and now you go to Macy's, and it's a very poor experience, I don't know what their curbside pickup is, but I'm just using that for example, then, you know, you leveled up that playing field of just curbside, where 18 months ago, you had no expectations, but now you start to do it and you start to engage with different brands. And it all has to be, it can't just be call the phone number when you arrive. You're expecting that digital experience to kind of go with it.
A lot of the smaller brands I've talked to through the pandemic, and I'll base this on the fact that, you know, FIDM has a pretty entrepreneurial network of alums.
Sure.
And so a lot of those folks who I've spoken to in the process of the pandemic, who've started a business, maybe they were one door and maybe an online presence, and then leaned in on e-commerce. And so now they're doing a little bit better in that space, but still want to grow over here. What would you, and maybe they don't have the money to come to somebody like you just yet, right?
Sure.
That sort of with that in mind, what would you recommend they think about as they think about the mobile experience? Do I just need a website that's also responsive on the phone? Should I go more in depth than that? What would you encourage someone sort of that size?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the first thing I would say is focus on the data. The data doesn't lie. As much as, you know, when you look at people that are coming from Instagram, people that are coming direct, where are they landing? Where are they starting that journey? So for instance, if they clicked on an ad on Instagram, they might land on the product page versus your homepage. What does that experience look like? Are you showing an ad, you know, that has a product, and then they click on it and that's nowhere to be found on the website and you got to search for it? And how do you remove friction? On the flip side, what we always, you know, say to do when you're looking at the data is more look at the funnel, but start at the bottom. Start at the last page when I checked out and I'm completed, and work your way back up. Because the last thing you want to do is start on the top of the funnel, and then all of a sudden there's, you know, kind of leaky buckets, as we call it, there where people are dropping off on that funnel. And if you can improve each layer up and up and up the funnel, you'll see success and conversion will increase for sure.
What are you guys seeing since you run this for brands, right? Like, so we're seeing data from eMarketer, which is aggregating a bunch of data, but you're actually doing this on the daily. Are you seeing the same trend, the same uplift in mCommerce sales? What are you all seeing internally?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, there's no doubt that more and more consumers, as well as expanded, you know, demographics are, you know, maybe had an iPhone before, never used it for shopping, are now shopping on it. So there's that ever-growing trend. I just think, you know, what we're seeing from the data, especially with these multi-channel retailers, is the assistance, you know, so that guided sale where they might not be converting and actually transacting on the phone, but whether they're in store and they're looking for reviews, you know, around that product or recommendations or the matching kind of outfit that goes together that's not merchandised that way in the store. How do you use that as that utility to really make sure that they're well-informed and they convert? It doesn't matter what channel, but they want to, you know, that phone is closer than an assistant. And if that phone, you know, can give them the guided extra push to make that purchase, that's amazing.
What do you have your eyes on right now? What trends are sort of out there that you're paying attention to?
Yeah, I would say it's a few different things. One is, I'm sure a buzz term that, you know, many folks have heard is headless commerce. So essentially, you know, the reason for headless commerce came about is giving you the flexibility to kind of create the front end that you wish and dreamed of with the data in the back end. 5, 6 years ago, that wasn't available on a Shopify to be able to take that and develop these templates on the front end in which really enrich and kind of are built for the mobile consumer. So being able to do that is just the foundation. Then on top of which I mentioned the app, which creating a unique, engaging experience, doing things like pre-sale, available, collaborations only in the app because these are your loyal customers. I would say the next layer and was touched upon, I think before, is AR. So AR, in the sense of being able to try stuff on in the augmented reality world of trying on a shoe, seeing how it looks, seeing how it fits, being able to touch and feel things, because you might not have the opportunity to go into the store to touch and feel it. So how do you bring that closer to the consumer to say, this is what it will look like when it's on your foot, and you can then purchase those Nike or Adidas sneakers.
Have you seen, just staying on that AR thing for a minute, because that's the space I've been super interested in.
Sure.
Have you guys been able to see anything specific that says AR increases sales?
Yes and no. I mean, there's a one-to-one correlation for sure, but I think there's the greater metric that you have to look at is lifetime value and engagement. So if they're engaging with the brand, they're more likely to buy. Maybe not in that one-to-one session, but the reality is they're engaging and they're coming back more often, and they're more prone when they're ready, to buy that product. And it's definitely a couple of touch points in general in retail stats that it takes to convert. It's not like I come, I buy. But if you can increase and keep it engaging, then absolutely. And I'd say, the social channels, Instagram, Snapchat, and doing those types of filters, which you don't really associate with augmented reality if you're the average person using them, that's what it is. So the more and more that you can get it closer, and Sephora doing it with makeup and trying on a lipstick, before you purchase it, the easier it is, and kind of removing that friction of the purchase experience. But
just so I'm clear, you're saying if I'm the brand, I shouldn't expect the sale just because they tried it on with the AR. That's just another step in the process, keeping them in the funnel.
Yes. And listen, I might win you over day one. You tried on, the new eyeshadow from Sephora and you loved it. Right. But not everyone.
I still got to snap a picture of it and send it to all my friends and make sure
it's exactly good. That's the other app. You can then share it. Same thing with like earrings. So you're seeing a lot of folks doing like earrings, ear piercing. Trying these things on removes that friction. I might have went to the store and tried it on, and this, as it gets closer and technology gets better, it feels more real.
We're looking for a console table, and I have so many snaps in my phone that I have messaged to 1 million people, because God knows I can't buy anything without getting everyone's approval first. So yeah, I've been making this argument about AR for a while, that it is not the final moment. It is not what's going to drive you to the purchase. It's just part of the journey, just the journey.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Again, questions in the chat, you can drop them in the bottom, and we'll be happy to take those to Jared in a few minutes. First, though, thank you, Jared. I want to introduce Pamela Denzinger. So I found Pamela by exploring Forbes. She's a senior Forbes contributor. She also has a master's degree in library science and is a market researcher who's been super interesting to talk to. And if you read through her material, and she's prolific on Forbes, there's quite a bit of material to go through. But in one of your most recent Forbes articles, and the one that caught my attention and why I invited you to join us today, Pam, is you said for mobile commerce to succeed, it takes an understanding of data, design, and how people think. And I just want you to go further on that. Based on what you've read and the research you've conducted, what does that mean? Understanding data, design, and how people think.
Well, let's take it apart. I mean, we need to understand the data, and that's all the data that we have about consumer behavior, shopping behavior, spending behavior, interests. And, when we think about mobile, it seems that many companies are not fully able to integrate and activate data that they have on the mobile devices with the data from other sources that they've collected through in-store and e-commerce connections. I mean, think about it. When we started with personal computers, they were called personal computers. We had them in our home. But now our mobile device is our most personal of all computing devices because we carry it everywhere we go. And I mean, your data about where you go, what you see, where you are is all there on your mobile device. So we got the data. Then we got the design, and mobile devices and transactions simply are not as well developed or is accepted for conducting e-commerce. I mean, about 60% of website visits originate on mobile, but only about 45% actually complete transactions through their mobile devices. So, there's a roadblock there, and people are having to go from the mobile to another path. They're being rerouted, roadblocks and being rerouted to some other path. So that's the design question. And then I think the most important part is the human side of things, the psychology. And, I don't want to offend Jared because he sounds like he's very in tune with the psychological aspects, but most of our technology applications are designed by technologists. These are left brain oriented people who are great with ones and zeros, but they really don't necessarily have those insights and understanding of the human side, the consumer side of business. And so I think the next frontier in our e-commerce business is bringing the right brain psychologists, sociologists, people who have real insight into consumer behavior and designing those needs into the systems that we use. And I think that mobile will be one of them that we'll see transformations in that regard.
One of the themes we keep coming back to in this series since we started it is how everything is converging. We've talked to people in charge of the retail store, and they're now working very closely with marketing in a way that they were never doing before. Do you see that as part of the rise of mCommerce and the emphasis brands should put on it? Is it just part of the convergence?
Well, I mean, without a doubt, but I think there still is that. I mean, the very fact that we segment sales and track sales by coming through e-commerce versus mobile commerce versus in-store shows that we really haven't completely understood or integrated mobile and all the different paths to purchase. I mean, we like to think of the path to purchase as a linear process, that there's discovery, then there's the engagement, leading ultimately to a transaction. We want it to be vertical, but that's not the way consumers work. That's not the way they behave. They can start on a path, jump off, go to another path, and that they may jump off not because they're forced to, like in some cases with mobile commerce, but they just do it that way. That's what they want to do. So I think, we have to integrate the whole idea of mobile into a much bigger understanding of the consumer. And the mobile is only one part of the journey, only one part of that path to purchase. But, it really isn't. It doesn't necessarily have to be the end, but it can be the end, or it may be the very beginning. We just have to really broaden our thinking and not try to keep things in boxes and think of that path as vertical.
I've heard you've said before, avoiding channel-centric thinking, which is, I think, what you were just describing.
Exactly.
And it's so interesting, though, because I think about the consumer's journey, and I think about all the things that they use this device to do.
Yes.
And you've even talked about like having to find the store. We do it here.
Right.
So when you think
and let me tell you I search websites all the time, and you would be amazed at how many people, how many stores, how many retailers, how many brands haven't claimed their Google listing. I mean, it's as simple as it's a simple process, but they haven't even claimed it yet.
I guess where I'm interested in hearing you talk more about then is the discovery role that this plays. Because at the end of the day, as I pointed at the beginning, still it's only 14-15% of all retail sales taking place in any sort of digital framework. So what do you need to use this to do? What do you need to think about if you were running a retailer, advising a retailer right now? What are you telling them to think about this to do with it? Well,
I'm fascinated. Again, claim your Google listing. So you got to start there.
Step one.
Step one. But I'm fascinated by the geolocating features. I mean, there's a scary sense of Big Brother watching, but if you are a retailer, you're a fashion boutique, and there are a lot of other places in your neighborhood where people can go shopping, for fashion. I mean, you can actually identify people who walk into somebody else's store and push out advertisements to them so that they know you're there. So, again, it's spooky, yet it seems incredibly powerful. So I'm fascinated by that location, because our personal computers, those personal computers are located at home. Our mobile phones we take with us everywhere we go, and we're lost without it. So,
and the research I've read, and tell me if you've seen something different, but the research I've read is, yes, a consumer will say they're spooked out by the geolocation, but in reality, when it's actually happening, they don't even realize and it doesn't scare. It's when you ask the question as a pollster that they're like, oh yeah, that's scary. But when we're actually providing it to them, they're jumping at it.
Yeah, because that allows you, I mean, again, think about, where people go, and that allows you to personalize the connection with the consumer. I mean, and that's what I think a lot of brands are missing, is about personalizing, feeding out information and feeding out ideas that people really want to know, not just stuff that the messages that you want to send out to them. I think about Amazon. I mean, I'm a librarian. I got books. Amazon knows the books that I read. But if Amazon were constantly inundating me with crap I don't want to read, like science fiction, I turn them off completely. But they have a continuous feed of books and other video, information that I love, and so I'm stuck. I stay with them.
Your particular specialty is in the luxury category.
Yes.
So if we can spend a minute there, we spoke to the director of stores for Saks Fifth Avenue almost a year ago now, Larry Bruce, who's a good friend of the college. He said they were going to be leaning in on digital, as we've watched over the last year. They have clearly done that. So I'm just curious what you're seeing in that luxury space as it relates to the mobile and mobile commerce.
Yeah, well, you should have an entire show on the Saks, dividing their operations of the store from the operations of e-commerce. Because I'm one who thinks that it may be a smart move from an operational point of view, because in-store shopping and e-commerce shopping are very different, should be handled differently by the staff, but they are integrated with the information and the data. So that's where their linkages are. But Kira was talking about TikTok and Instagram and all the social media and all of that stuff. And I think that's where there's a real difference between the true luxury consumer versus people who maybe aspire to be luxury consumers, but aren't there yet. And that's the luxury consumer is a leader. They are not a follower. They could care less what, this celebrity or that celebrity is wearing. I mean, they are the trailblazers. They are not followers. So I think so much money that is being pumped into influencer marketing by luxury brands, I feel a lot of that is wasted. In 10 years, when the Gen Zs and the millennial, the younger millennials maybe have the money, maybe it will be a different story. But right now, I think what we're missing is understanding the discovery process. They discover through their phones, but then they have the confidence and the ability to make their own decisions. And so they're really not concerned about what people wore at last night's Met Gala, because they want to be on their own red carpet and make their own statement.
Do you think for the luxury brands, is there something specific they need to offer? I just think about it as a sort of the trend line usually is, and correct me if I'm wrong, luxury first, so goes mass. So is there anything luxury is doing in the digital space right now that mass will be doing a year or two from now?
Well, I think luxury consumers are very aware of the concierge nature of the business that they're in, so that they are more attuned to the personalization. Again, Amazon gives me the kind of books thematically the books I want to read. I think that luxury brands are more attuned to personalizing the information and the products that they put in front of the consumer. But again, it's like, it's the difference between concierge versus sort of, mass personalization. So I think we need to really think about that concierge aspect.
What do you have your eye on trend-wise right now? And I know you look at way more than just e-commerce and e-commerce. So you go as broad as you want to, but I am curious to know what someone like you who guides major corporations in the luxury space, what are you looking at right now? What's got your eyeball?
I guess I'm always interested in one, the little guy and somebody who's out there trying to disrupt a market, who's going a different path, someone who is trying something new, something different. So I'm always on the lookout for that. I'm enormously interested in fashion. I have to tell you, I just discovered The House of Elliot, a series on PBS. And I've been just fascinated by seeing the fashion side, design of fashion business in the 20s, and also from a women's business perspective. So I'm interested in so many things when it comes to business, but I think it's always who's doing something different, because I could care less about people who are just, and I think too many brands, too many companies just follow the leader. Again, the same. I'm looking for those, to be a trailblazer, not to just follow the crowd. So
any particular brands have your eye at the moment? I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, too many to count. I mean, one of the things though that I'm very troubled by in the luxury market in particular is that so many up and coming brands and up and coming designers really got put on hold by the pandemic, and some of them will not be able to survive. It's like what I see, the pandemic, the big got bigger and they got so much bigger. And the small people trying to, make a living, trying to forge their own path, really lost out. So to me, that's the thing that troubles me very much is how far behind so many brands that should be there, would be there, but can't be there any longer.
Well, and to tie it back into what we're talking about today, I think a big piece of that, because I too have been troubled by it, and as I think about it, and you look at the success of an Amazon, right, that you've spoken about, right? We all turned to Amazon in the pandemic, even if you hadn't before. If you were a smaller company, you just didn't have the resources to build out that fulfillment operation to begin with. Not even the people, right? Because then we got to get into that conversation. And then, oh, by the way, we also have to talk about the supply chain issues. I mean, it was just that I couldn't agree with you more. And I think for me, at least right now, one of my emphasis is focusing on those smaller brands and helping them in this moment, now that they're stocking back up and staffing back up. And I'll get
and in fashion, it's good to see that some of the really the last generation, the big designers from the previous generations are really giving a hand up to some of the new and emerging designers. And I think that's wonderful to see, because they need the help, because again, they got cut off at their knees in the pandemic, and many won't recover.
Yeah, as we invite Kira and Jared to turn their cameras back on, I would just say to folks that if you're interested in reading a little bit more about that, because it was interesting that that topic was addressed in Women's Wear Daily as it relates to New York Fashion Week, and specifically like looking at how these brands are helping each other to kind of recover from this. I'm going to take the first question that just came in, and it looks like it's toward Pam. Can I pick your brain in regards to being original, not following the crowd on your brand? Would you mind giving some examples? I'm putting you on the spot again. And then actually, Jared and Kira, I will ask you the same question.
Okay.
I think it's a good one to address.
All right. Well, I just, for years, I would talk to people. Oh, we are always out there following the trends. We're always looking for what's new and what's different, and what's happening in the world. And then I'd ask them, well, how do you do that? What is your model? How do you how do you find those trends? Oh, well, we go to all the trade shows and we see what everybody else is showing. And it's like, that's not trend following. That's not trend searching. That's following. You know, I just wrote an article about RH and Gary Friedman. The man is absolutely brilliant. And his vision of RH, the old restoration hardware, as an ecosystem of, I don't know how exactly he puts it, of products, places, spaces. You know, he's just cast this wide umbrella around all kinds of things that he is going to do to bring RH and make that the lifestyle of the luxury consumers across the world. His last earning call, I mean, I said that's a must listen to everybody. He is a visionary who just will not be limited. And I mean, he's brilliant. And I think fashion, people can learn, you know, fashion, clothing, all of that. You could learn tremendous amounts from how he is envisioning his brand. And I wasn't a believer when I first heard him. I thought, maybe who wants to live in an RH house? But it's working, and it's working brilliantly. And he may fall off the cliff. That's one of the risks when you're going out there. But I recommend everyone listen to his earnings call. You can get it on the investor website, on his RH investor website.
Just to be clear, I would live in an RH house. I just can't afford the square footage in California, and I probably couldn't afford to put the RH furniture in unless I get it at the outlet. That's always a good place. Kira, I noticed you were nodding as we were talking, and so I'm curious to get your take on that. What are some of the original brands that you're seeing out there? I mean, I feel like, and I'll give you a compliment, I think your brand is one of them. It's kind of taking a unique approach, but what are others you're looking at?
Yeah, no, I have been, everything that Pam, you've been saying, yes, it's so accurate. And I loved everything you also said about luxury earlier. That was just so fascinating. And I completely agree. Yeah, I think, you know, I think that we are in a time, to Pamela's point, where it's just, we think it's unique if we're following somebody and we're iterating on something that they just did a little bit differently. And all of a sudden that to us is innovative, but it's not, right? Like, it's a version of something that just came out that you're trying to latch onto. I think innovative to me are people that are actually solving a need, right? That are actually saying, what does the customer want and how do I fix that need? I think it's the people who are taking unique approaches to business models that traditionally weren't in the space. I actually think Billy Razor is a really good example of that, to be honest. Was what they did absolutely groundbreaking? No. Was it groundbreaking for what was happening? Yes. It's a razor company that's now subscription, where they use more than 50% of their money in influencer marketing. Trying to get that audience where they can get them on subscription from, you know, teenage years all the way up. And that's a phenomenal idea. As a customer that finally purchased after being targeted all the time, it's phenomenal razors too. But I really thought that was unique. You know, you have a lot of companies like that would have never taken that approach, and they leaned in full to that. I also think people are going to streetwear a lot more, which is, I love that. I think that they're looking to the street and saying what's happening and trending now without impressions potentially from elsewhere. And if there's impressionability happening, where is that coming from? And instead of chasing someone else's trend, chase back that and figure out where and how that's coming to be. And like I said, brands that take risks. So I've always been somebody who has liked and enjoyed doing that. A lot of my success has been built on working with people or ideas that other people wouldn't necessarily touch. And I think that you have to have calculated risks. You have to look at your brand, look at the customer base and say, I get that maybe that wouldn't work for 90% of brands out there. Would that work for us? And if it would, take that swing, take the risk, as long as it's tasteful, you know, use your guidance. But yeah, I feel like take the risk. We're a little bit too safe sometimes.
Hence the OnlyFans idea, I think.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I stand by that. I think that'd be really great for some brands, specifically some brands, but I think it'd be great.
Jared, let me put the question to you. Oh, I'm sorry, Pam. Go ahead.
I just want to tell Kira that I'm fascinated, because I was not familiar with your brand Killstar, but I'm fascinated by it because you are taking a different route. So I'm going to look into it. Maybe we'll do a story.
Yes, no, we're doing we have a lot of good stuff coming up, guys. Doing a little bit of a light rebrand this year, but we have a lot of big stuff coming out next year too. It's going to be great.
Jared, when you think about brands that are innovating in the space, and specifically, I think within your realm of creating apps, who should we look at? Like, if we were to download 3 apps today that we should look at that should be inspiring to us, what are you looking at?
So I'll be biased and,
Fair
kind of
enough.
name drop some of our clients and what we're doing and unique stuff. But in all seriousness, when you look at luxury, Burberry has always been, kind of a pioneer in the space. Back when luxury used to be flash sites and moving out, to real technology, into sites, to what we do today with their apps of being really able to personalize, but also connect them with their associates. So clienteling, being like a theme and a buzzword, is reality, really where you get to talk to your associate in the store through the app. They can push new products to you. You can purchase, you can get them same day delivered, and all that kind of functionality that Pam mentioned of kind of concierge, where like, what was it, 6-7 years ago, of the attainability of getting like a black car seemed like very affluential and, kind of hard to attain. Of now you could just press it and anyone can get a Suburban to come pick you up, in an Uber. And how do you make those services really to the masses? And I think there's always going to be luxury that does stuff like that, and then the brands follow. But I think back to the core and the UX side of things is just test. Technology is there, being able to A/B test and multivariate test, and what might work for a brand from just add to cart versus add to bag, and all the kind of basics things that make a site. Test and you'll learn.
I'm just curious because I'm interested in the technology side of it. And so my question to you to follow up on that would be, what is Burberry happening culturally that is keeping, you went back to Flash, you're going back. So if this company you're saying is still technologically at the forefront, what's Burberry doing right in your opinion?
I wouldn't, I don't want to just, peg, Burberry, but I think it's a cultural thing against the organization. So the interesting thing around Saks is, who knows what that will do culturally, of like who gets to sell. So, all along is, the store associates, a lot of them still get commission, or, and how do you kind of break down the barriers to make sure that no matter where they purchase, everyone's getting the right attribution and the right credit? Because it used to be, if they purchase on digital, versus they purchase in the store, and how do you kind of give them the credit? And those that are going to succeed are ones that look at it as one company that's, doesn't matter where they interact with the brand, who's kind of making all those channels gel well. If I had something in the fitting room, do I now see it, in my favorites list, when I get back home? And how do you make that technology really sync, end to end?
With the few minutes that we have left, and since no one submitted a question, I'll go to one of my basics, which is this one. Like, help our audience go to their bosses and sound like the most impressive person in the room. So what do they need to be thinking about? What should they be reading about that you see that could potentially make them the most impressive person in the room at the next company meeting? Pam, we made you go first. Oh, yeah, you can go. I was not going to make you go first, but sure, yeah.
Read my articles on Forbes.
It's good PR.
Okay, now, otherwise, I made a jump out of corporate in 1992. So I didn't do any of that stuff very well. Managing your boss, I didn't do that very well. So, but I do think pulling in all kinds of information and looking horizontally, because I think way too many businesses, they look vertically. Well, we want to know what our competition is doing and what's happening in our sector. No, the insights and the innovative ideas are going to come across horizontally. So you got to have your fingers in all different pies and bring those together.
That's, I think, quite smart. Kira, how about you? Thoughts on that?
Couldn't agree more. I think it's, looking across, obviously stay on the pulse of what's happening in the immediate marketplaces and with your competition. But I completely agree with Pamela again. You have to look across all verticals, and that truly is where innovation's going to come in. When you're looking at car companies as a fashion brand, when you're looking at an air conditioning unit, by the way, was an ad that, like when you're looking at who's doing what and is it successful and how can I make that and iterate that for my category. I think less looking at your competitor right there, of course, keeping track of it, but more so trying to figure out how to break into it, something that's brand new for you in the space.
Okay, good stuff. Jared, how about you? What's the one thing you would tell people to keep your eye on so that they should talk about in the next board meeting?
Sure. So I'm going to kind of go back, to Pam's comment around the technology and developers point of view. and drop some philosophy in UX. So we did a whole study around, we called it Thumb Fu, and essentially it's designing for the thumb. Phones are getting bigger, your hands are not. So how do you make the experience for your mobile device to be, kind of engaging and not make you think? So is the add to cart button somewhere that's not reachable? We've all had those moments where you've dropped the phone because you tried to readjust and it's just not reachable. So how do you design for your thumb in the experience? And that's, again, not your competitors, that's anyone. That's from Spotify to TikTok to Target, and engaging that experience.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate the three of you for joining us this afternoon. It's been so interesting and getting, I'm always so lucky I get to speak to you all ahead of time. So I get even more knowledge out of you all, but I really do appreciate it. And I think our audience has too. So thank you very much. Next month, it actually will tie in a little bit to what we started talking about today. We'll be looking toward resale. So next month's conversation is on the future of resale. I'm sure you've seen some of the huge moves in that space over the last few months. So we invite you to join us then. When you get the email in the next couple of days, there will be an RSVP link in that email as well. I also want to remind you that we have a new series that we started over the summer. We've been kind of playing with it. And this fall, we're launching it full steam ahead. My buddy, Mimi Sue, who is the director of our merchandising and marketing program, and I, starting later this month, I believe it's September 23rd. I did not write it down and I'm forgetting right now, but I'm nearly certain September 23rd. Mimi will probably text me in a minute and say I'm wrong. But September 23rd, every Thursday at 4 p.m., we'll get together on one of the live platforms. So we do it on Clubhouse, we do it on Twitter Spaces, and talk about what's been going on in retail that week. Tie all of the loose ends together, the retail trends, the tech trends, see where they've come together and what they're doing. We invite some of our favorite people to come join us and chat about it with us. And then the other cool thing about those spaces is that you can participate with us as well by asking questions and participating in the conversation. So we invite you to join us for office hours beginning September 23rd, 4 p.m. every week. I just got confirmation and I think it went in the chat for everybody. That is correct. The last thing I want to show you as well is that QR code. We're going to go out on this today. Please take a moment to jump on our form and just answer these. I think it's 10 quick questions. It should take you less than 2 minutes according to Outlook when I created it. So jump on there. Let us know what you think about this series. Is the time still working for you? Would you prefer it to be in the evening or first thing in the morning? Do you want us to move it to a podcast? You tell us. We're trying to figure out how to make sure we continue to serve you as we come out of the pandemic. And so please take a minute. The future of resale, thank you for asking, was, I got to look at my calendar. It is October 12th. So mark your calendars for October 12th at noon. We'll talk about the future of resale. Thank you as always for joining us. Stay inspired and have a great afternoon.